One of the hugely unpleasant effects of an anxiety issue is the way anxiety seems to slam into us at full force when we least expect it. Rather than a gentle sliding scale of steadily increasing and decreasing anxiety, it seems to go from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. This can be one of the main reasons why we end up getting diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. We no longer have any nuance to our responses. We've stopped simply feeling the appropriate levels of anxiety about the more challenging aspects of our daily life. We're now just experiencing random and severe visceral anxiety or even panic symptoms. So, is this really simply because this is what it's like to have an anxiety disorder, or is there something else at play here? In this video, I'm going to be explaining what it is that's actually going on and why the threat of an anxiety disorder might well have become the very reason we feel like we have one. Hi. I'm Tim Box, I'm a mind coach, and for more than a decade now, I've been helping people overcome all sorts of emotional and psychological issues, and in particular, helping people get control of their anxiety levels. One of the most satisfying things I hear clients say when they're the other side of their anxiety issue is that now when they feel anxious, they know exactly what it is that they're anxious about. It no longer jumps to those high levels that overwhelm and swamp their awareness, and they've now returned to feeling appropriate, functional, and even useful levels of what we might call normal day-to-day anxiety. After all, before we developed an issue, anxiety was just one of our emotions, like any other. Its function? To draw our conscious attention to whatever our mind deems to be the most important or pressing issue at any given time. This only became a problem when our anxiety got to the sort of level that made anxiety itself the most pressing issue. And this is where the problem arises. So, I saw a client recently who mentioned that they'd previously seen another therapist who was talking about anxiety being a sliding scale from 0 to 10. They told me they couldn't relate to this, as for them, anxiety was like an on-off switch. There were no varying degrees and no sliding scale. The moment any anxiety occurred, it hit them at 10 out of 10, and that was that. This was very much explained to them as simply what happens when we have an anxiety disorder. The working theory being that we just feel anxiety to a greater degree than the normal person. However, they could remember a time before this 10 out of 10 effect started to happen, and they could even roughly define the moment when things went from normal to extreme. The problem was they were now getting anxious without any obvious cause. The powerful physical anxiety symptoms would strike seemingly without provocation or good reason. They'd been told they had now developed an anxiety disorder, but hadn't really been given much more explanation than that. Now, I'd love to tell you that this was an unusual and quite severe case, but in truth, I see this all the time with clients who reach the point where they no longer know what they're anxious about, but feel crippling, debilitating anxiety on a regular basis. An important part of what we might refer to as recovery is realizing that this instant, inexplicable high anxiety is the result of starting to regard anxiety itself as the big problem. Believe it or not, you do have a reason for feeling anxious. There is always, without exception, a reason. It's just that often, even before that reason hits our conscious awareness, a part of our subconscious process has freaked out about becoming anxious. Your subconscious is far quicker at flagging imminent threats than you are at consciously recognizing the thing you're anxious about. Any trace of concern about even the most minor situation in your life suddenly becomes swamped by the high anxiety or even panic you feel about becoming anxious. Even with those clients that do know what they're anxious about and talk about how high anxiety shifts from one thing to the next, the problem here isn't that anxiety moves from one thing to another. That's its job, to point out the next important thing that requires conscious attention. The problem is the level of that anxiety. It's not the message, it's the volume it's being delivered at. And this high volume is caused purely by our concern about how anxious we now seem to get about everything. So if we imagine anxiety like that sliding scale from 0 to 10, the normal everyday anxiety is probably going to be measured at about 1, 2, or 3, the everyday stuff, preparing for the meeting tomorrow, remembering to pay that bill, getting the kids to school on time. The more important stuff might take us to 4 or even 5. The job interview, the medical procedure, the big presentation at work. The numbers above that are reserved for genuine fight or flight level stuff, the stuff that requires immediate and maybe even life-saving action. This is the anxiety that started to feel much more physical. Now, in this day and age, it's quite rare we have to take instant life-saving action. Most of us don't go into battle that much anymore. However, any perceived threat to our safety and security, and our mind might hit the red alert button. Now, there is this thing called second fear. Put simply, it's the fear of the fear, or in this case, our anxiety about anxiety. This happens when we start to perceive anxiety itself to be our problem, and as a result, when we experience anything on the anxiety scale, even a 1 or 2, we instantly experience further anxiety about the fact we have registered any sort of anxiety. This then takes us to a higher level, and once we realize we've gone to a higher level, we then experience further higher levels of anxiety about that. This creates a feedback loop. Anxiety just starts to shout louder and louder as we feel more and more threatened by how high our anxiety is becoming. Oh, and by the way, this all happens in an instant. Our subconscious works very fast when it comes to triggering emotions. As a result, this is then perceived as anxiety striking at 10 out of 10 for no obvious reason at all. Now, whilst this might seem like an inescapable vicious cycle, all of this was actually fueled by the simple and largely false idea that anxiety is a problem. Anxiety is our illness or our disorder. Anxiety has become the thing we regard as being a genuine threat to our safety and security. This is why so many of those that have recovered from high anxiety will tell you that an important part of the recovery process was to, at some point, stop worrying about whether or not they feel anxious. They've gone from regarding anxiety as the big threat in their life to now regarding it as a natural response to life's ups and downs, a functional part of dealing with the day-to-day challenges thrown our way. Anxiety itself has stopped being something to get anxious about. It's at this point that we stop creating the second fear, and we get that wonderful feeling of knowing exactly what we're anxious about from moment to moment. So here's the simple truth that ultimately sets us free from high anxiety. Yes, we will get anxious, maybe even highly anxious at times, but as long as we recognize that even when anxiety feels uncomfortable, it isn't any threat or indicator of illness, then we stop flicking the switch on that second fear, and we stop the score on that anxiety scale getting any higher than it needs to. So the next time you feel anxious about something, embrace knowing what it is you're anxious about. Don't shy away from that feeling and accept it as a part of your mind trying to draw your attention to the current important issue. If you really don't know what it is you're anxious about, that means you're simply anxious about anxiety. But remember this, anxiety is a part of your mind trying to help, and anxiety itself cannot hurt or kill you. As such, anxiety will never be something you need to be afraid of. So I really hope this video has been of help. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with others, and before you go, why not subscribe to the channel for more regular anxiety advice. If you have a specific anxiety related question you want answered, then you can join me live on this channel every Friday evening at 6 p.m. London time when I do a live anxiety Q&A. You can also now become a member of this channel and get access to hours of extra content and exclusive members only live sessions. Just click the join button on the main page. But that's it for now. I'm Tim Box. Always remember to be kind to your mind, and I'll see you next time.